Mr. Hickey?
Here.
Mr. Strackhoff?
Here.
Ms. Christie? Aye. Mr. Odelius?
Here.
Mr. Leonard?
Here.
Mr. D is not here. Mr. Zupnik?
Present.
Mr. Travellini?
Here.
Ms. Patras? Here. And Ms. Gutschall.
Here.
Adequate notice of this meeting of the Bedminster Township Land Use Board was filed with the Township Clerk and sent to the Burnersville News and the Courier News and to all subscribers and posted at the Township Municipal Building, 1 Miller Lane, Bedminster, New Jersey, on January 11, 2019.
Please stand for the flag salute. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a little homework to do here. The minutes, I hope everybody got to see them today. From July 11th. We have a motion.
Motion to accept.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstention on that.
Okay.
And Scott as well.
And Scott.
I abstain.
Okay. Any abstention? Okay. Motion approved there. We have a couple of resolutions that we need. We have, our first one is 405 Main Street, Mr. Katz. That is, do I hear a resolution on this? Sorry, a motion on this.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Strackhoff?
Aye.
Ms. Christie? Aye. Mr. Odelius?
Aye.
Mr. Travellini?
Aye.
Ms. Patras?
Aye.
And Ms. Gutschall.
Aye. We also have another resolution, Crossroads Business. This is a request to grant an extension.
Yes, and I guess this is technically the first night you're voting on the resolution, but it's pretty straightforward. It's a, if you remember, Crossroads Business Center asked to modify their parking and
Parking.
their sidewalks, et cetera.
Right.
And they're just asking to carry it, extend the time frame for protection against changes in the ordinance.
Right.
It doesn't, it's really, until they change the site, it's really meaningless, so it's not an important thing to deny or to hold.
Okay.
And so
And this is
I
for,
would recommend that you just to make a motion to adopt that resolution, which extends it, and I think until
1 year.
November to, yeah.
1 year.
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Strackhoff?
Aye.
Ms. Christie?
Aye.
Mr. Odelius?
Aye.
Mr. Travellini?
Aye.
Ms. Patras?
Aye.
And Ms. Gutschall.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, I would like to propose a closed or executive session now to discuss our board secretary's position. And only that, I'd like to propose to you a resolution for the board to consider to go into closed or executive session pursuant to Section 7 and 8 of the Open Public Meetings Act to discuss matters of personnel involving our board secretary, and that's the only matter to be discussed. The matter is to be revealed to the public upon the completion of all litigation and appeals and the removal of the need for confidentiality. Is there such a motion on such a resolution?
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Why don't we do a roll call on that?
You want a roll call?
Yeah, let's do a roll
Okay.
call.
Trina?
Mr. Hickey?
Aye.
Mr. Strackhoff?
Aye.
Ms. Christie? Aye. Mr. Odelius?
Aye.
Mr. Leonard?
Aye.
Mr. Zupnik?
Aye.
Mr. Travellini?
Aye.
Ms. Patras?
Aye.
And Ms. Gutschall.
Aye.
We will adjourn to the back room, the behind the dais, but the meeting people may remain in
You
the
can-
meeting.
Yeah, yes. Jay, we'll be back in a few minutes. Yes.
I'd like Paul and Frank to join us.
Lou can join us as well, he's in the back.
That's it?
Nice to meet you. Nice. How wonderful.
So, Madam Chairman, we had an executive session about a personnel matter involving our board secretary position, and my understanding is that the board is ready to make a motion to reject the proposal by Trina Lindsay to serve part-time as board secretary and to not recommend a counter proposal to the Township Committee, but to confirm that Trina would continue as board secretary until September 1st, 2019. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Aye. Second.
And any ayes? All the ayes, please speak loudly.
Aye.
Any nays? No nays, so it's a unanimous determination. And of course, thank you, Trina, for all your efforts throughout the many years you've been with us, and we really appreciate that.
Great.
Trina, I want you to know that this is certainly not a personal thing. This is strictly the job
I understand.
itself, and we want to thank you for all your efforts. You've been impeccable for the years that you've served us, and we thank you.
Thank
All
you.
of us do.
Thank you, Trina. Good luck.
And we wish you all the best in your new position.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Before you begin,
Yes.
we do have a resident here that is hearing impaired, so if you all could speak into your microphones tonight. that would
Okay,
be
we'll do our
appreciated.
best. Okay. I lost my agenda. It's here somewhere.
Determination is not.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so we have, let me open it up to the public. Is there anyone here who has something that they would like to say or a question that is not on the agenda tonight? Okay, seeing no one, we'll continue. We have determination of completeness for 2 applications. Paul?
Madam Chairman, the first application is for the Primrose School, properties at 2073 Burnt Mills Road. I wrote a completeness letter dated August 5th, 2019. There are a few items for which waivers are being requested. The only one that I believe should be provided before we go to hearing is the Historic Preservation Commission Certificate of Appropriateness, that some status on that needs to be provided. I don't believe they've been to the HPC yet, or if they have, a certificate of appropriateness has not been issued. The one thing we have to do is you can deem it complete, conditionally complete, subject to that coming in and the waivers. You could deem it incomplete because that's not in. If you do deem it conditionally complete, then there should be a deadline set for when that HPC determination comes in and schedule a hearing. I think, given our workload, I don't know if you want to do that, or you just say that it's incomplete because the HPC has not yet weighed in on it. That's really your call.
Board, have any,
How long will it take to get this particular piece of information?
If I may speak on behalf of the applicant as well.
certainly come up front, please. Name and your position.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Luke Pontier of the law firm Dave Pitney, here on behalf of the applicant. I did want to provide a brief update. So the applicant has appeared before the Historic Preservation Commission. They were at the Commission's June 21st meeting, where the Historic Preservation Commission did approve the application, but with comments and a few suggested revisions. So the applicant has gone back and forth a couple rounds with the Commission, and just yesterday submitted revised and what we hope to be the final revisions to the application to the Commission, just some minor tweaks on the architectural plans. We would request that you deem the application conditionally complete, subject to the certificate of appropriateness, and that we are scheduled for a hearing.
Do you have a letter from the historic?
We not yet have
Not
the
yet.
certificate of appropriateness, no.
Paul, how would you say to proceed?
Well, the comment in my letter was we needed to get some kind of an update on the status. We have an
We
update on
do,
the status.
okay.
So if the board wants to deem it conditionally complete, then you can do that, and then we'd have to talk about scheduling
Okay,
of a hearing.
okay. Any questions from the board? No?
I have a question for Paul.
Yes?
So if we do deem it complete, conditionally complete, when's the soonest we would try to schedule this? October?
Well, I was going to talk about that for a minute. We have obviously
two.
a hearing tonight that I don't think we'll finish this evening. I'm pretty confident we'll not finish this evening. The next meeting, and we have another application right behind this.
Right.
That's also ready to go. The next coming meetings are September 5th, September 12th, October 3rd, and October 10th. So you have to figure out how you're going to do that. The question is, do you just block all the time for tonight's applicant until it's done? Do you break up the meeting for more than one applicant? And I think that's the hard part of the decision you need to make relative to the schedule.
I would suggest the first meeting in September, we give these two applicants, and then the second one would go then to relieve. That's how I would divide
So
it up.
the first meeting in September would be
Yes.
Primrose School and the Nervine application, which
Right.
would be deemed complete next, and the second meeting in September, which
Right.
is only a
Would
week
be-
later, would be a continuation.
Continuation, right, that's how I would break it up.
But does the Historic Preservation Commission meet between now and September 5th? We probably can figure that out. We would want a letter, I think, from the Historic Preservation Commission before you
If
start.
it's conditionally complete and the letter doesn't come in, then they're not
They wouldn't-
complete and they don't get heard that night, and
Yeah.
we just have the other application.
Okay, as long as Luke
Can I
as
Well,
long as
maybe-
Mr.
Maybe we should
Pontero...
switch it then, Paul, maybe, or, well, maybe that wouldn't work either.
No, they will endeavor, as long as Luke and his client understand that they need the letter to
Right.
actually start their hearing, because we need to see it and we need to understand what they say. So, that acceptable,
Yes,
Mr.
yes.
Pontier? Okay. So, make your best effort to get the letter from the Historic Preservation Commission in August, if you can. Is that for the
Okay,
board?
with me,
That's practical for
or
the
with the board?
scheduling, too.
I think so.
Yeah. So.
Okay, Paul?
Okay.
So if the
All
board
right.
would entertain, it's a motion to deem the application conditionally complete, subject to the conditions Paul suggested in his completeness review letter, and the condition discussed this evening about obtaining the letter from the Historic Preservation Commission before the hearing starts.
Okay, so we need a motion?
Do you want to add, would you add a deadline to that condition, getting that letter? The end of the month, like you said?
I said before the hearing starts, so that,
Yeah.
I I like that. I'll use that against Luke when I have to.
All right. All right, so we,
I'll motion that.
okay.
Seconded.
Second. Trina?
Mr. Straka?
Aye.
Ms. Christie? Mr. Adelius?
Aye.
Mr. Leonard?
Aye.
Mr. Zupnik?
Aye.
Why, it's Board of Adjustment. It's not? Sorry, Mr. Hickey, I skipped you then. I thought this was Board of Adjustment.
It is Board of Adjustment.
I didn't see a D variance in the application.
There is a floor area ratio.
Oh, there is a flare, okay, sorry,
Okay,
so
'cause it's-
Colin doesn't...
No.
is
No, I believe it is
The
board.
committee member and the mayor are ineligible for D variances. Sorry, Colin.
Where
We're
was
all
it?
good. All good.
How about the next one? Is he eligible for the next one? I think he is.
Yes.
It's planning
Yes.
board, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Travellini?
Aye.
And Ms. Patras?
Aye.
And Ms. Gutschall?
Aye,
Thanks, Board.
Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Madam Chairman, the next application is for Nervine Associates, preliminary and final major site plan. This is for 2475 Lamington Road. This is for the conversion of the existing building into a bakery use.
Right.
I wrote a letter dated August 5th. There are 4 items for which waivers are requested. I have no objection to those waivers, and the application could be deemed complete and scheduled.
Okay, do we hear a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Who's second? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you should know.
Scott, second.
Okay. Mr. Hickey?
Aye.
Mr. Straka?
Aye.
Ms. Christie? Aye. Mr. Adelius?
Aye.
Mr. Leonard?
Aye.
Mr. Zupnik?
Aye.
Mr. Travellini?
Aye.
Ms. Patras? Aye. And Ms. Gutschall?
Aye.
Madam Chairman, Mr. Hickey, the council committee member, is now excused because the...
Do you have anything to say before you leave, Mr. Hickey?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hickey.
Okay, I think we're ready for our applicant. Elite, 2435 Leamington Road. Sorry for the delay. I understand. We apologize for that, but it was necessary.
All the best for the trip.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the board, members of the public, members of your professional team, my name is Jeff Lehrer. I'm from the law firm of DeFrancesco Bateman in Warren Township. I'm here this evening representing Elite Properties at Bedminster LLC. Number one, I would like to, with Mr. Collins, confirm that all notices are proper and jurisdiction is properly before the board.
Let's see, Madam Chairman, I know there's an attorney, Dennis Galvin, representing at least two interested parties, maybe three, maybe more. And let's see if there's any objections as to jurisdictional issues from the attorney representing interested parties, and he should make an appearance. So, Mr. Galvin?
Good evening, everybody.
Want to come up front, please, if you don't mind?
Hi, my name is Dennis Galvin. I reviewed the notice. I had some concerns about the explanation of what the project was, but after careful consideration, I decided that we will not be objecting to the form of the notice.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I will, if you could, hopefully we can cooperate with when I need to get up and ask questions. I don't really want to be too boisterous and bounce around, but I do want to make sure that I get an opportunity to cross-examine witnesses and I will be retaining a planner to present a case on behalf of the objectors.
Okay,
Thank
no
you.
problem. Mhm.
Thank you, Mr. Galvin. Just to be careful, are there any other members of the public or interested parties who have an objection as to the notice or other jurisdictional issues?
Yes. Yes, Mr.
It's not the substance, that's the procedure.
Mhm.
There's one other person who wants to speak, Mr. Lair.
Mhm.
So, sir, please state your name and address.
Brian Haggerty, 128 Fairview Drive, Bedminster, New Jersey. I have a question of notice of how many variances being sought, because I saw the application at Town Hall, and there are 2 variances being sought. I was in a correspondence that went to private parties that said there are 4 or perhaps more. Can you clarify that point? I don't know whether I object because I don't know what I'm talking about.
I think Mr. Lair will go over that.
Sure.
And,
The notice provided for a D1 variance for use to allow multifamily in a district that doesn't allow for that. Secondly, we noticed for a height variance under D6 where height exceeds by more than 10% the height allowed by the ordinance. And third, we did, to be completely safe in our notice, although we're not certain that we need it, and we'll certainly have a discussion about it, we noticed for a D5 variance for density. So that issue, there is some question about whether your planner agrees or thinks that we need it. We did notice for it to over-notice, so to speak, but I'm sure that issue will be discussed later.
okay.
And when you say notice, which notice was that? To the adjoiners, or was that in the application?
It was in the notice to all adjoiners and in the newspaper.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No objections.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, we'll just confirm for the record that we've reviewed the notice and we're satisfied that the board has jurisdiction to hear this application as a D variance application and related preliminary and final site plan and site plan exceptions. Sure. The board attorney, and I'm confirming for the record that we've reviewed the notices, and the board has jurisdiction to hear this application as a D variance, and related preliminary and final site plan and site plan exceptions. and the applicant may go ahead. I'd like to swear in their witnesses, at least those who are here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. We're excited to present this application to the Land Use Board and to the public and to your professionals this evening. What we're seeking is variance relief together with preliminary and final site plan approval in order to construct two buildings along Lamington Road. Both buildings will be used for residential use, while one of the buildings will be mixed use with 4,000 square feet of retail contemplated on the first floor of that building. I'll call that the West Building. And the purely residential building will be called the East Building because of the direction that we're facing. There will be a total of 40 apartment units, with the Easterly Building containing 18 apartments and certain amenities on the first floor. The Westerly Building will contain 22 apartment units, as well as the 4,000 square feet of retail space. 6 of the 40 units will be affordable units to be applied to the township's third round affordable housing obligation. Both buildings will have underground parking to service the apartment units only. Access to the underground parking will be via a key fob. The retail space and residential guests will use the above-ground parking, which has 41 spaces. And the spaces underground for the apartments will be allocated to only the residential tenants. So that was one of the questions that was raised by your traffic consultants. Both buildings will have been placed as far as we can to Lamington Road so as to be the least intrusive to and have the least impact upon the property owners to the north and to the ridge itself. As you are no doubt aware, the property slopes upward from Lamington Road with a grade differential of approximately 40 feet from Lamington Road to the rear property line. There'll also be an outdoor grilling area and seating area in the westerly side of the property behind the Westerly Building for the residential tenants. Access to the residential units will be via elevator from the garage level. My client is an experienced builder in New Jersey, and you will hear from one of the principals about the quality of their product. I have a total of 5 witnesses, only 4 of which are here tonight. So I know that Mr. Galvin is here to ask that this matter be carried because he doesn't have a planner. I don't have one either. My planner will not be here this evening, so I'd ask that we proceed because I will not finish this evening. The witnesses I do have this evening are, I will start out and put them in the order that I will present them.
Please.
Joe Jaworski, our site engineer. David Checchio, a principal of the applicant. I will then present John Sirocco, our site architect, and then finish off with Craig Paragoy, our traffic expert. Craig Rinkamp is our professional planner, who will not be here this evening. Hence, we will need to schedule another meeting another hearing at the end of this meeting. Without further ado, Madam Chair, I'd like to proceed unless Mr. Galvin...
Why don't you use one witness at a time, since Mr. Galvin probably has some voir dire for experts.
Sure.
So I guess Joe Jaworski? Joseph?
You may proceed, I'm not going to interrupt. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Jaworski, please raise your right hand. Do you promise or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
And please state your name and address.
Joseph Jaworski, 245 Main Street, Chester, New Jersey.
Could you spell your last name?
Yes, J-A-W-O-R-S-K-I.
Mr. Jaworski, can you provide the board with your educational and professional background, please?
May I ask a question before
Has he been accepted previously by this board?
I'm not certain.
I have.
Okay.
I think the board should carry on as an OSC before whether or not those witnesses qualify.
I was just going to ask him to provide his educational
Yes, I
professional
understand,
background.
so we could accept him, I
Right.
understand.
Would you mind doing
Before
that,
you-
Mr. Jaworski?
Let's do that. Before you do, it's best practice to let Mr. Galvin or people who want to ask questions about his qualifications
Okay.
to cross-examine. It's called voir dire. It's just about qualifications, not about the substance. So I don't know if there'll be questions about the qualifications, but that's best practice in a contested case. So I have a good mic.
I was trying to speed things up for you, to the point of going on and on.
I have known Mr. Galvin for a long time. He's a gentleman. You will find that to be the case, and so I appreciate that, Mr. Galvin.
All I wanted to know is if he's previously appeared by the board and the board is comfortable with him, I would have had no problem with Mr. Dorsey, although I'm not familiar with the designation.
Joe, for the third time, could you provide the board with the benefit of your educational professional background?
Madam Chairwoman, good to see you again,
Yes.
members of the board. Joseph Jaworski, I am a 1985 graduate of Rutgers University with a degree in civil engineering. I am licensed in the state of New Jersey as well as 5 other states. I've testified throughout this state, Pennsylvania, New York, Maryland, Connecticut, and many others. I have served as board engineer in several towns, including the town of Boone and the borough of Fair Lawn. I've testified well over 2,000 times in the past 30 years, have been accepted in many different boards, and hold several other licenses as well as a certified floodplain manager and a certified municipal engineer.
Thank you, Mr.
Madam Chair, I would ask that
Well-
his qualifications be accepted by the board as a professional engineer.
The board will accept his qualifications as a professional engineer. Please go ahead, gentlemen.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Mr. Jaworski, did you prepare or supervise the preparation of the plans that have been presented to the board, this application?
Yes, I did.
Would you mind taking time to walk the board through the existing conditions and then proceed on to what's being proposed?
Thank you, Jeff. The first exhibit I have is a aerial view of the property. It's a colored aerial of the plan that was in the plan set, but I'll put that up as an exhibit, and I can mark that as A1.
Yeah, the one, please.
So this is an aerial exhibit. I'm sure you're very familiar with the property. Located Lamington Road, which is running right to left along the bottom of the page. Route 206 north to south off to the left. The parcel is central in the area. It's about 5.2 acres. As you know, there are several buildings on the property, including 2 houses, several garages and sheds. There are 2 driveways which service the 2 houses. One is located all the way to the east, and then one central to the property. As Jeff had pointed out, the property does slope basically north to south towards Lamington Road. The highest point up in the upper left corner is about elevation 216. The lowest point is about 157, so at that grade difference is about 48 feet. As Jeff pointed out in the middle, it's probably about a 40-foot grade difference. There are heavily wooded area to the left side. There are numerous trees throughout the site, and then you can see there are some open grass areas. So that's the existing site. The proposal, as Jeff pointed out, is basically 2 buildings, residential. One of the buildings will have some retail, and I'll bring up my second exhibit, which is a colored version of the site plan that was provided to the board.
That'll be A2.
And I'll mark that as A2. And that is dated, based on the site plan set 6/13/2019. again, this is a colored version of the site plan with the landscape plan overlaid on top of it, so you can see the colors of the various landscapes. So again, same orientation, Lamington Road on the bottom, left to right. The proposal is for two buildings. The eastern building, we're going to call Building 1, which is on the right side. The western building is Building Number 2 on the left side. Each building has a footprint of about 14,500 square feet. The building Number 1 on the side has a driveway along the right side of the plan. This driveway is pretty much located where the existing residential driveway is over at the eastern property line. Building Number 1, as I said, is about 14,500 square feet, 2 floors. It contains 18 units, and there are 35 parking spaces in the garage, which is below the building. Building 2, which is on the west side, contains 22 residential units, as well as 4,000 square foot of retail, which is located on the right side of that building, in the lower right corner of that building. So that building is the true mixed-use building. Building Number 1 is purely residential. The layout of the rest of the site, basically, you can see the colored in gray, which would be the pavement. So the driveway along the right side comes in off Lamington Road, up to the site, and then will feed into the garage. This is not true underground parking. Both the entrances to the garage are at grade, but because of the grade difference as you come west to east, it becomes underground parking or below grade parking, but you're not driving down into it like you would a regular underground garage. So that first entrance goes into the parking garage for Building 1, and again at grade. This garage, as in most of the residential projects we work with Elite, it's a controlled garage, so it has a garage door, and it's either operated by a fob or a garage door opener for the residences. So all the spaces below are assigned spaces for the residents. Each resident has a space. They have a garage door opener, so it is not open to the public. There are a certain number of spaces in that garage for that unit, for that building, and it is controlled with the controlled access. As you continue up to the north, there is surface parking right behind Building 1, also colored in gray. And then we come to basically what we call it's a cul-de-sac. We did introduce a central landscape area in the middle of that cul-de-sac just to dress it up, but that'll be a one-way cul-de-sac turnaround that will allow the circulation to come back out to the single driveway, which is on the right side. As you continue through that cul-de-sac, you would be able to access Building Number 2, again at grade. So you're driving in at grade. It does not dip down. The parking is below. Again, because of the grade difference, as you go to the west, that parking does become below grade, or the grade is a little bit higher, but you're accessing it at grade. Between the two buildings, colored in tan, is basically a terrace area, a concrete area, and that concrete sidewalk, that gray color, extends behind Building 1 over to Building 2, between the buildings, and then there's also an access out to Lamington. On the right side are a set of stairs, which would go down to Lamington Road, and as you continue to the left, there'll be a series of ramps down to make up that grade for ADA access. The application does also include a sidewalk along the entire frontage of the property, which is highlighted with the tan color, all the way to the driveway. So that'll be the full extent of the property, includes that sidewalk. As we proceed further to the west, there's a rectangular area, which is the outdoor recreation area that Jeff had spoken about. Basically grilling area, picnic tables. It's about 1,200 square feet, and that is accessed from Building 2 via sidewalk down into the building itself. There was a question about, in one of the reports, about access to this area for the residents of building number 1. Building number 1, any resident that would like to use that would basically go into building 2 and then access it in that fashion. Dave Cecchio is here from Elite. He can explain that. His other properties, they basically do that for safety. They're a little bit leery of having direct access from the surface parking, especially when we have a retail component. This is really for the residents. So it's a controlled way of allowing the people to use that. Also, when you hear from John, our architect, there are amenities in Building 1, a gym room, a recreation room. So the residents in Building 2 would have to go out and go into Building 1 to get to those amenities. So it's kind of just a way to control it and keep those amenities for the residents themselves. As far as the grading, as we said, it was a little bit challenging. We had a pretty good slope coming down the property. So we basically stepped the buildings. The left building number 2 is a little bit higher. Building number 1 is a little bit lower. And to make up that grade in the back, where the parking lot is, we have a tiered retaining wall, which wraps around the entire back of the parking lot. So that would be a segmental type wall. The first tier is about 4 feet. It'll step and flatten out, or we can have some landscaping. And then the second tier will be about 6 feet. So we make up about 10 foot of grade difference there. The reason we did that was really to help preserve the entire back half of the property. If we did not introduce this wall, we basically would have to chase the grade back and disturb more of the vegetation and the trees and the area to the north. Realizing residents live to the north and trying to get that development pushed up toward the road is kind of the reason for those walls, because then we are able to catch the grade up very quick and leave really that back half alone without disturbing it, touching it. When we get into the landscaping, we do realize that there are some gaps, especially where the house is and some other gaps, and the applicant is committing to fill those gaps with additional landscaping and put additional trees there. So the only disturbance will be going back to plant additional landscaping. As far as the lighting is concerned, we do have basically residential style lights. We had spec'd out an Acorn fixture LED at 16 feet high. Mr. Farrell had pointed out that the township does have a different type of residential fixture. We can certainly comply with that. It'll be a low-level light. We had spec'd out basically an average foot candle of just below 1, which meets your ordinance as an average. The wattage, the equivalent wattage of these LED lights is about 87 watts. So it's really pretty minimal. And I believe the lights the township do have some screening or some shielding, additional shielding for the lights along the back, just to make sure that they don't produce any glare, especially as you go up the hill. The landscaping itself, as I said, throughout the site, landscaping along the foundations. We do have some street trees out in the front, some trees in the rear. Your township has an ordinance, tree replacement ordinance, which is based on size of trees and number of trees. We did a complete survey of the property, identifying all of the trees, which trees are coming down, how big they are. On the landscape plan, there's an actual, the tree removal plan, there's actually a chart that runs through that calculation. And when you do that per your ordinance, it comes up to a replacement number of trees of about 500. Right now, we have 73 trees shown on here. We received the reports. Mr. Ferraro agreed that the 500 is the number. We went back and looked at primarily this northern area where you see green. That's really where the gaps are in the trees and the grass. The applicant is committing to plant about 150 trees in that area. We just did some rough counts of how we could space that and get that in there. We came up with about 150. So I think at the end of the day, we'll have in excess of 220 trees on the property. And we would propose that the gaps that we do fill in would primarily be with evergreen trees. Most of the other trees are deciduous. We would propose evergreen, so that would really help this buffer back in the back as the years go on. If the project gets approved, it would just fill in and create a nice green area. Just as far as distance is concerned, the back property line to that first wall is about 186 feet. So you have a really good buffer there. So that rear area would really remain untouched, with the exception of planting those trees.
Joe, what's the height of those retaining walls?
This back one is a tiered wall, so the first one's about 4 feet, and the second one's about 6 feet. And there'll be a flat area in between. You can see the bushes and shrubs, so it'll be...
So there'll be bushes, shrubs planted between the two retaining walls?
Right, between the tier, and on the tier. As far as stormwater is concerned, we obviously are increasing impervious coverage on the site from what is there today. We have proposed 3 separate detention basins which will be underground. 2 basins will be in the front yard in front of Building 1. There'll be a series of underground chambers with an outlet structure. Everything drains to the southeast corner into the existing system, which is where all the water goes today. So that'll control, and these 2 front basins will primarily pick up the roof areas of the building. There is a 3rd detention basin in the rear parking lot up in the northeast corner. That again will be underground. The type of basin that we spec for this is a product called R-Tank. I do agree with Mr. Ferrero that type of system is very hard to maintain. It's a bunch of crates. It's a great idea, but in practice, it's a little bit hard to maintain and keep clean. Applicant is certainly amenable to changing that over to a more conventional system. And all of the stormwater comments in Mr. Ferrero's report, we went through them. We've worked many times with Mr. Ferrero's office on many different applications, stormwater, and have been able, we ran through all the comments, and we're confident we can certainly meet with them. And hopefully between this meeting and next, we can run through and just address all of those issues.
Joe, just going back to the lighting, the township has a 1-foot candle requirement, correct? 1.0 foot candle?
Their recommendation is one foot candle average over the site.
And what is the average that we're proposing?
We're just under that. It's about 0.9. When we do put the new lights in that the township has, we'll certainly remodel it. But we'll try to get to around that same, just to keep it at a residential level, so it's not too bright. As far as the circulation of the site, again, all the driveways are 2-way driveways in and out of the drive, with the exception of the cul-de-sac, which is 1-way around. That cul-de-sac is 24 feet wide. So it's wide enough for 2-way, but we're proposing to make it 1-way. Craig, our traffic engineer, can go into that with his testimony. We did size that for the proper emergency vehicles and turning templates to get around. And it also allows another nice feature as far as loading and unloading. We do have a small retail, 4,000 square feet does not require, whatever user there won't require a whole lot of loading and unloading, but most likely a box type, FedEx type truck, UPS. That vehicle will be able to use this cul-de-sac and basically park on the southern end of that, have access right to the terrace, have access to both buildings, and there'll still be ample room. It won't block any traffic around. So instead of adding more pavement and having a dedicated loading zone for a very small retail use, we decided to go with this. We needed to make that cul-de-sac that big anyway, just for the emergency vehicles, but it's going to double up as a nice area for the loading that'll be out of the way.
And the loading will be basically box trucks?
Yeah, for that, for the 4,000, whatever use it is, and certainly when the applicant, if this gets approved, gets a tenant, and it's something different, they would obviously have to come back. But the anticipation is it'll be a small, type user that would not require any kind of big loading.
And there will not be any tractor trailers that would be accessing the site to?
No, it is not designed for that, and there would be no reason for a tractor trailer to come into the site. As far as the signage is concerned, the applicant is proposing building signage, three building signs to identify the residential and the retail. Those signs are 8 square feet each for a total of 24 square feet. There will be one freestanding sign at the driveway, which will be 12 square feet. Very low-level sign. There's actually a detail of that on the detail sheet. That sign does create a variance because your ordinance is basically either or, building signage or freestanding. If you have both, then you need a variance. So our planner will go through that. But we think it is important to be able to identify the residential property at the corner where the driveway is, as well as once you get into the site to see where the retail is and the residences are. The trash for the site, basically the residential units will have an internal trash room, so it'll be in that garage. This is, David can go into that a little bit more. Most of our other properties work that way, very successful. That goes in the trash room. They have a porter that's on site that maintains the property. When the trash is ready, he will basically wheel that out. A small pickup type truck will come to the driveways, pick it up, and then exit out. So the garbage vehicle does not have to go into the garage. That's wheeled out. It works very well on the other properties, and that's what's proposed here. We also have a 10 by 10 trash enclosure up on the northern end of the lot, just off the top of the cul-de-sac. That'll be used for the retail. So the retail, again, not very big, 4,000 square feet. They will be able to utilize that outdoor trash enclosure. It will be fully enclosed with a gate. Trash truck can come up, basically back in, and then use the cul-de-sac and return out. The frequency will really be based on the user, when and if they get a user, if this does get approved. All the utilities are available on Lamington Road. There will be water, gas, electric, separate services for each building. They will all be new services. Obviously, the existing services are not sized for these type of buildings or the fire flows. We will include that. We are also proposing a fire hydrant in the rear parking lot, so we'll have a water line coming right up through the middle to provide that fire hydrant in the back. I know the plan was sent to the fire department. If they come back with any other recommendations as far as hydrants or locations, we'll certainly work with them to provide what's needed. There is one other small retaining wall right along the front. It's about a 3-foot high wall. And really that wall is going to kind of pick up the architecture of the building. I don't want to jump to John's exhibit because it's not marked yet, but off to my left you can kind of see it. And it matches, with the stone and the decor of the building. And John can go through that when he gets up to talk about the buildings. The units themselves, again, John will go through a typical floor plan, show you the inside, what these look like. And I think that's about it.
Just a couple of questions. It's implicit, but I just wanted to put it on the record that all of the existing structures on the site will be removed, correct?
Absolutely.
And Lamington Road is a county road?
It is a county road, yes. The application has been made. That driveway will be under their jurisdiction. We do have the proper site triangles on that road. And again, when Craig, our traffic expert, talks, we're getting rid of 2 driveways, replacement with 1. This driveway is actually very well located between the intersection of 206 and the light to the east. So when he did his queuing analysis and all, and we all know what happens here in the morning and at night on 206. But being that this driveway is located in a central portion between the 2 lights, it works out very well as far as the queuing and the turns that are made.
Just looking at your zoning chart, this application is way below lot coverage, correct?
Yes, the allowable lot coverage by buildings alone is allowed to be 20%. We are at 14%. And lot coverage of buildings and canopies is 40%. We are at 14% as well. So we're well below both of those criteria for the zoning. Before one other thing, Jeff, the parking, the parking is governed by RSIS for the residential portion, and then the retail is based on the ordinance. When you run through the bedroom counts, which John will do, and the retail portion, there's a total of 97 spaces that are required. We are proposing 99 spaces. There was one typo on our plan. Under building number 1, the last little section here was miscounted as a space. It's too narrow to be a space, so it's not a space. So that was the one. Originally I thought we had 100, but the count is 99 proposed and 97 required. That includes ADA spaces on the surface, one over by building 2 and one over by building 1, with the appropriate ramps to get into those buildings.
Yes, I believe that comment about the one space was picked up by both the traffic consultant for the town as well as Mr. Ferrero, correct?
Yes.
All right, so for clarification, we are 2 spaces beyond what's required.
That's correct.
All right. Madam Chair, I'm not certain whether this is the right time, but we've had an opportunity to review Mr. Ferrero's report. I don't know whether Mr. Galvin wants to question Mr. Jaworski or whether this would be the appropriate time. I can assure you that there's very little in Mr. Ferrero's report that we cannot comply with.
Is there a procedure for this, Tom, particular?
Well,
because
I
of
think I'd rather get through Paul's review report and
Okay.
then open
That's
it
what I
to
was
us.
going to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Jaworski, you've had an opportunity to review Mr. Ferrero's report dated August 5, 2019, have you not?
Yes. Yep.
And you and I have had a discussion about that report, have we not?
Correct.
And the vast majority of this report, the applicant is either commentary or we can comply with. Are there any portions of this report that require you to provide additional testimony or that cannot be complied with?
Yeah, if I could, Jeff, I'll just run through it. I'll hit the items that I think need to be addressed.
Sure.
And certainly defer to Mr. Ferrero if there's any others that he would like to bring up.
Sure.
Basically, sheet 5, the site plan. Number 2 deals with that outdoor recreation area and just questioning the access to that. I think I went through the testimony of the logic of why it's like it is. Number 4 deals with the loading and delivery area. Again, we're kind of double dipping, using that cul-de-sac as a turnaround as well as a de facto loading area instead of making a designated one. Number 6 deals with the access to the parking garages, and there's no real room for a turnaround. That's because they're all assigned, one person per spot, they have access to it. No one else goes in there. So a person has a car and they leave, no one else is parking their spot. That controls the number of spots. Again,
No public access to that lower area?
Excuse me?
No public access to that
No,
garage?
that's
Nobody
correct.
can wander in there by accident and have to back out?
It's controlled, the gate, and
Okay.
it can wander in. Certainly not a vehicle. And Elite has done this for many, many years, and many, many projects. We just finished one up in Maplewood, very similar to this, has the same type of layout with the access, and it's working fine.
Rolling gate or just an arm gate?
I don't know. I'll defer to Mr. Checchio on that. Light fixtures, number 3 under the grading plan, we did talk about that. We will remodel that with the township lights and then just make sure the proper shielding is in place.
Excuse me, Joe, can you go back to comment number 7 under the site plan about the terrace area? Is there any intention to have outdoor seating there? If there's a food service, or what is the intent?
Yeah, there's It could be, depending on the tenant. So I think Elite would like to leave that open as retail. If it becomes a cafe or a food tenant that might need more parking or outdoor seating, I think they would have to come back and address that. All right. Next page, landscape plan, we had talked about lighting, sheet 9, we had talked about that one. The rest of the construction details, we certainly will work with Mr. Farrow's office on those to get those done. The final retaining wall, the underground detention basin, number 11, on page 5, applicant is committing to change that to be a more suitable system, as Mr. Farrow suggested. Stormwater management report, a lot of this are technical items that we will certainly sit down with your engineer's office to work out, and I don't think there's anything in there that we cannot come to an agreement on. And I think that was all, Jeff, that we had identified, and certainly defer to Mr. Farrell with any others.
Paul, you have anything else you want to discuss?
I don't think there's anything else to be discussed in detail. Obviously, some plan changes and report revisions are required, and then we can see how those comments might be addressed.
Okay, all right. And the trees, there are comments on the trees?
Well, the comment on the trees is that there are 500 replacement trees required. There are 125, I think, or 225 proposed as replacements, more or less. Board has to make a determination on that waiver request.
Okay.
And I think the board has seen those waiver requests in the past.
Yes.
Do we normally exclude the ash trees from the count?
No, we haven't directly done that. But there are provisions where dead or diseased trees don't count on a tree removal permit. So I think there is some logic to that. I think we all recognize what's going on with the ash trees.
Okay, Frank, you have any comments at this point? Okay. At this time, I'll open it up to the public.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You talked about the residential trash being indoors and contained. Is that compacted indoors, or is it just wet and dry,
It's not
dry
compacted.
waste mixed?
There's a separate trash room, so it's designed specifically for the trash. I'll let Mr. Checchio give you the details of that, but it's I don't believe this one is a compactor, just because it's only 40 units. The larger buildings they would put in a compactor.
But multiple containers, is that the
Yes.
idea? And a pickup truck picks them up.
Yeah, and I'll let Dave go through that, but it's a pickup size truck. It's not a huge garbage truck.
And there was some discussion about the mode of these retention basins that they had designed versus the one that perhaps you're recommending, Paul. Any differential in the amount of space they take up versus why would they recommend the system that they are versus a more conventional one?
There's been a strong push by the manufacturer to sell the one that was originally proposed. And keep in mind, there's two different types of systems on the property. One of them is fine, one of them is problematic. I think there's been a strong push by the manufacturer of the one that's problematic. And I've had some experience with the maintenance of those, and it's a problem.
Operationally, there's no difference. It's just a matter of...
Now, functionally, they're the same.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
About the large trucks. What about a moving van? Don't we need an 18-wheeler moving van to come here to unload furniture?
Well, different sized moving vans. The bottom line is these are primarily 1- and 2-bedroom apartments. There's not a whole lot of room for that. The experience of the developer is they really don't get the large trucks.
I see.
But U-Hauls, they have the different size U-Hauls, which are the size of box trucks. That's primarily what these apartments do, just because there's not enough room for that much stuff.
I see. Because the apartments are small, the moving things.
Yes, and that seems to be the mode of this day.
Okay, I'd like to open it up to the public. Let's keep it to this witness. Yes,
I'd like
sir.
to go first.
Absolutely.
focus on the trees for a second. You said that you need 500 trees and you're not going to be able to provide any more than 200?
No, I did not say that. I basically said that the tree calculation, which is on the tree removal plan, yields a replacement of 500 trees. Right now, we have 73 trees. Applicant is committing to look at that back area to put additional trees in. We did a quick calculation of spacing and size and came up with around 150 trees, which would put us up into that 220 tree range. When we do the actual design, we could very well get more than that, but just to give the board kind of a sense of that back area, we'd be, I think, at a minimum of around that 220 number.
Are there any historic trees on this lot?
I do not know.
You haven't made a study for that?
No, we did a tree survey in accordance with the ordinance. I don't believe, and I'll defer to Mr. Ferraro if there's any provision of looking for certain type of historic trees. I don't know.
I'm asking because this is a historic district. No? That wasn't discussed at all? Of the 500 trees, if you were to make the building smaller, then you might be closer to the appropriate number of trees? You'd take down less trees and need less trees to fill in?
Possibly.
Okay. Let's talk about the parking. What are the size of the parking spaces?
9 by 18.
Okay, is that standard for the ordinance?
I believe 9 by 20 are required, but there is a provision if an overhang is provided that 9 by 18 would be allowed.
So each of the residential units will get 2 dedicated parking spaces?
I think it's 1. I'm going to defer to our architect and applicant on that, as far as how many are designated per apartment. But I know there are, at least 1 is assigned per apartment.
Now, you were talking about the commercial.
Oh, okay, sorry.
You can repeat it.
Oh, I'm sorry. The designation of the parking spaces, I would defer to the applicant as far as how many are designated per apartment.
Did you make a calculation of the 3 adjacent properties to determine the front yard setback?
No,
Weren't you required to do that?
I don't believe so.
Okay, I don't agree. You were talking about the light being 1-foot candle. What is the light at the border of the property?
I would defer to the lighting plan. However, I said the average is just below 1-foot candle, which would be in the parking area and the driveways. Certainly, the rear parking lot, the rear property line, it's 0, just because of the slope and the distance from the parking lot. I believe the side yards are also 0, but I would defer to the lighting plan for that.
And are all the lighting's downward lit?
Well, the current design is an acorn type fixture, residential type fixture, but as I stated, Mr. Ferraro recommended we go to the township, I think it's a lantern type with shielding, so I would have to look at that light, but we will remodel it with that light to make sure that there's no glare.
All right, and on the need for commercial parking, how did you determine the need for the commercial parking?
Pretty sure that was based on the ordinance. Let me just see if I can find that for you. Yes, the parking for the commercial is 1 parking space per 225 square feet of net floor area. So the 4,000 yields 17.8 spaces required.
So, but it won't work if it's a doctor's office, right?
I don't know that. We didn't do that calculation, but basically this is for a general retail. If the applicant gets a tenant that is different than this, then and requires more parking, they'd obviously have to come back to the board.
And the retaining walls, have you done any engineering on the retaining walls, on their safety?
These walls have not been designed yet. We have designed hundreds and hundreds of walls just like this, so if this project gets approved, we will design it and go through the proper channels. It has to be designed by a professional engineer, and all the proper stability calculations will be provided.
Why do you think 6 feet is appropriate?
As I had stated, we tiered the rear area, 4 foot and 6 foot, basically to preserve that back area, so that we didn't have to grade more and disturb more of the back area. A 4 foot and a 6 foot tier with planting in the middle is very appropriate for a residential use.
Let's talk about drainage. What was the issue? One of the drainage systems work and one of them doesn't work?
No, that wasn't it at all. Basically, there are different type of underground detention systems. We had one type in the front and a different type in the rear. As Mr. Ferraro pointed out, we deal with many manufacturers that have all these new type of systems, and they have different bells and whistles on them. This particular one, I agree with Mr. Ferraro, is a little bit tough to maintain. It's not really conducive, so the applicant has no problem in changing that, and we'll work with your engineer's office to go ahead and change that and make it acceptable to him.
Now, is your post-development runoff going to be the same as your pre-development runoff?
No, the post-development will meet all of the local township standards as well as the state standards, which it mimics, so that meets all of those reductions for the appropriate storms.
But you could size it larger to do a better job of capturing more of the water running off the site.
The detention basins are sized to meet the appropriate regulations.
So you wouldn't be able to meet the 100-year storm criteria?
The basins, as they're designed, meet the 100-year storm criteria, and they meet the storm regulations of the township.
Do you have any car charging stations in this building?
I don't know. I defer to the applicant on that.
Okay. You said that there was going to be you wouldn't know anything about affordable housing.
A little bit.
The sidewalk that you're proposing.
Yes.
Does it connect anything to the left or to the right on adjacent properties?
Right now, it does not. I would assume if those properties get developed, the township would like that property owner to connect them, but this application and this applicant has committed to install a sidewalk along the entire frontage of the property.
Was the sidewalk required by the ordinance?
I don't know.
It's required by RSIS.
RSIS.
But there's no plan to start creating a sidewalk along Lammy, right?
Off the frontage of the site?
Yeah.
That's not part of this application.
And how would you describe this area, this neighborhood?
How would I describe it in terms of what?
Yeah, well, is it?
As an engineer, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question. What are you?
Is the site currently wooded?
Partially, yes.
Are there 2 existing homes on the site that have been there for a long time?
Yes.
Is this property located in the VN zone?
Yeah, it is.
And this is a historic designated area.
True. I'm going to answer yes, that's true. He doesn't know the answer because he's an engineer, but I'm going to tell you that's true.
What? And you're going to defer all the parking questions to the traffic engineer?
No.
You were making comments about the fact that currently, all right, so back to the property. The property has 2 houses. How many cars do you think exit this property today?
Our traffic engineer did a traffic study, and based on the IT criteria, so he would be able to answer that.
Okay, so I was right, we'd have to wait for the traffic expert.
Well, you said any questions about anything parking, and that's not true. But the specific question that you just asked, I answered that the traffic engineer would answer.
There's 97 parking spaces on the lot.
Right now, there's not.
Oh, really? You're proposing 97 parking spaces, correct? And 9 parking spaces.
Let's see my
Is that
notes.
the way we're going to play it?
The parking calculations yield a requirement of 97 spaces, and the proposal includes 99 spaces.
You opined on the record that everyone understands how complicated this road is in the morning, correct?
I deferred that anyone who lives in this area, which I do, knows that 206 and Lamington Road gets backed up in the morning going south and in the evening going north.
So currently, we have two houses that produce 2 houses worth of traffic, and now we have 97 parking spaces, which will have cars that will come out onto this road.
Craig, our traffic engineer, did a traffic study, which I think I mentioned a couple minutes ago, and he'll be able to go through those actual numbers. Excuse me. He'll be able to go through those actual numbers, comparing the existing, the proposed use, and future growth of the site per the ITE standards.
But you're missing my point. You opined that this location of the driveway was a good location for this driveway.
I stated that the location of the driveway is probably in the best location it could be, almost halfway between both of the lights, and Craig can go through why, because of the queuing that happens on the road. So for any development of this site, to pick not the ideal, but the best location to access the site would most likely be on the eastern end of the site.
Okay. I have further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the residents? Mr. Haggerty, come on up.
Why don't we swear you in just in case you make a statement, but please try to focus on questions.
Yes, sir.
You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth so help you God?
I do so swear.
And please state your name and address and spell your last name.
Brian Haggerty, Haggerty, 128 Fairview Drive, Bedminster.
Thank you, Mr. Haggerty.
By a slight way of preamble, I am an engineer registered with the state. I went to college for some of the stuff that you do, but we were doing it in Fortran and punch cards then, so I quickly gave that up. We didn't have TR-55.
When I started, we were still on the punch card.
Okay. So you don't mind that I review your work?
Not at all.
Hold it against me. Thank you very
Not
much.
at all.
Thank you for professional courtesy. I also am in code enforcement in another area, so no location. I'd like to know the area of the site and the area of the study area for the drainage report. Because I've got the master plan saying that block 27, lot 18 is 4.2 acres. I have the application writing as 5.2 acres, and I'm not sure on the water study because you have off-site areas and an excluded area, but on page 2, you mentioned the 1.47 acres to the north and the 4.9 acres total. So I don't know if the 4.9 is the study area and the lot is 4.2.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Haggerty.
But you're going to redo the drainage anyway based on...
We are, but what I just wanted to point out, and I apologize to the board, there is the lot right now is 5.2 acres. The lot line actually extends out into Lamington Road, as some of the old properties do. So there is a dedication of that area, and you could see it on the plan, it's kind of hatched. So the dedication yields, the net lot area will be 4.85 acres, which is probably where the 4.9 is coming from. And as far as the drainage area, right, we're going to redo that with the new basin. I would certainly have to go back to the drainage report to look at the actual drainage areas, but I'm certainly happy to provide that to you.
So, I mean, I got the lot area from the master plan from the build-out, and that's not necessarily 1,000% accurate, right?
Correct.
Okay. In the drainage calculations themselves, in the study, I did not find a flow diagram in the study, and I was trying to go through the narrative description of basins 1, 2, and 3, and which flows goes to what.
Right.
And the intercepts 1 and 2. I know there are 2 inlets. Sorry, I get excited. Sorry. My colleagues say that all the time. So there's basins 1, 2, and 3, and there's the 2 inlets, and I forgot the exact term that's in here. And I am having trouble from the narrative figuring out what goes to what. So if you could, since you're responding to the engineer's comments anyway, you might want to give a diagram for that, or?
Sure. We probably have it, might just not have made it to the report, but basically, the 2 basins in the front both flow into one into the other and into that southeast corner.
Yes.
And then the basin in the back lot, parking lot flows back down to that same point. But I can only provide you a
Okay.
flow diagram for
Yeah,
that.
I realized there was some serial spillage, but I couldn't
Yeah.
make that up.
No
Very
problem,
good.
no problem.
I was concerned that the comment that recharge, you're looking for a waiver because it's a fully rock site. And I'm thinking of deep rock percolation and all that other stuff we talked about. And I get my water off an aquifer, so I know water flows through rocks.
Right.
So I don't know what you do with that.
Yeah, Ms. Frower actually brought that up as well. We did some soil testing out there to determine the rock and the non-permeability of it. Ms. Frower brought up a point that maybe there is some of that, so we will certainly look at that next time around.
And I'm not going to bore the public with any details about time concentration versus lag and so forth, because truly I was bored that. So really nice hydrographs, though. They're really gorgeous.
Thank you.
Was joking. Okay, moving on. I detect a bit of asymmetry in existing drainage versus proposed drainage. And what concerns me is that you want to exclude the area DA1B and the area DA2B from the requirement for outside limit of disturbance. I'm not sure if you're excluding them from the calculation. If you could elaborate on that.
At this point, I cannot, but I will certainly take note. I have 2 of my design engineers here who I know are taking notes for me, so we will definitely look at that when we get back to the office.
Okay. And that gets back to, as I look at the maps, the offset area, the excluded area, if I may. This is not an evidence copy, but it is your report. So this northeasterly corner appears to go onto lot 19. So you legitimately exclude that.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that. It's probably because we are not touching that at all, disturbing it, and that, but we'll take another look just to make sure.
If you consider this, and I made a little bar graph here that you can see it's not evidence, but it's a little aid to the idea. If your entire site consisted of 9 units, and you need to reduce by 1%, and you reduce to 7 units, you didn't make it. But if you find 4 units to exclude, now you're going from 5 down to 3, you have a 40% reduction.
Point taken. Understood.
Thank you. Since you're going to redo the report, I don't want to elaborate and take much time on engineering detail. I don't know if I wrote a letter to Mr. Ferrara, would that be appropriate? He could then, and the commission share with you? Would that? Remember, I'm not an engineer in this jurisdiction, so it'll be a layman from 40 years ago.
You're certainly welcome to provide Mr. Ferraro that, and we would take no offense to reviewing that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Would our stenographer, would you like a 5-minute break? Are you okay?
I'm sorry.
Would you like a 5-minute break?
Okay.
You're okay? Okay. Is anybody else in the audience that has a question? Yes, please, come on up.
Sir, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Please state your name and address.
My name is Dan Goldman, Goldman, from 35 Hillside Avenue in Bedminster, to the northeast corner of that, northeast corner of that diagram. My question is, in the, I'm not sure if you're able to answer this, but in the design of the modification and development of the lot and the design of the building. Do you know if the developer, architect, engineers retain the services of an acoustical engineer or a firm with consulting expertise in acoustical engineering?
They did not.
Were any site tests performed, either tests or studies of the nature of sound transmission on the land, such as I'm specifically interested in neighbors to the north, homes, whether how sound is transmitted from the site to homes and neighbors in that area?
No specific studies were done. We are bound by state and local sound requirements. We would have to abide by them for use like this, residential. It is very unlikely there would be any noise issues. If there is, we would certainly have to deal with them, but in our experience, especially with the distance of over 180 feet and a 40-foot grade difference from the development to the rear, noise is not anticipated to be a problem. However, we're bound by the law to comply with those noise requirements.
I did understand that there might be 97 cars on a daily basis coming in and out of the property, as well as individual HVAC units for each unit for 40 units, so 20 HVAC units facing the rear of the property and 20 HVAC units on the front side of the property. So I imagine that would create some sort of sound that would be transmitted through the air that
Yes,
would affect neighbors.
It absolutely will. It will be within those requirements of the sound.
But there is no tests done as far as how sound travels across the site through the trees or no trees,
Well,
neighbors to the north, east, and west.
Yeah, as far as the units, air conditioner compressors and HVAC units, the manufacturers provide data as to the sound that they generate, and based on that data and the distances on the site, we can assure that they will comply with the regulations.
But you only have the data given by the manufacturers, not actual transmission data as far as how sound travels across this actual piece of property.
At this point, no, we do not have that data.
Similarly, what about light transmission? With the CERT, were any tests or studies done of actual placements of the proposed lighting and how that lighting is transmitted to neighbors to the northeast and west?
Yes, absolutely. The design, it's a computer model that basically models the light and the foot candles. As we had spoken, we modeled it with a certain type of acorn fixture. We're going to remodel it with the township fixture. But yes, that is tested and modeled on the plan.
But acoustical modeling was not done?
Acoustical, no.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
No further questions.
Next, who is, come on up, please.
Can I just get a quick clarification?
Yes, certainly, yeah.
Is there going to be, I would assume, a single HVAC unit or 2 HVAC units for each building, or is each unit getting its own system?
I'm going to defer to John, our architect, on it. He'll be able to go through the unit and what type of systems for the heating and cooling of each unit.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Sir, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name and address.
My name is George Waters. I live at 196 Somerville Road, Bedminster. I guess just based on a couple of statements in your testimony, I'm not sure I agree with the characterization of the nature of the moving in and out of folks in the apartment, because in my experience, it's not the size of the apartment that ends up dictating the size of the truck. It's the distance to or from how far the folks have moved. So for example, I moved here from a studio apartment in San Francisco. We came in an 18-wheeler to the hills because even though it was a 1.5 bedroom unit, because we're in with 50 other people's stuff. And so with a transient population that's going to be living in an apartment complex, you have no way of predicting or controlling how far they moved to or how far they came from. And so what are the provisions for dealing with the, I would say, inevitable scenario of 18-wheelers trying to figure out where to park, where to unload, and how to turn around?
Sure. I'm going to defer that to Dave. They've done many properties like this. He has much more experience moving in and out. He'll be able to answer that much better than I can.
Okay. From an engineering standpoint, though, it would not be possible for a truck of that size to enter the parking lot and successfully turn around.
We really didn't design it for that. Now that you say that, between next meeting, we'll run that template just to see if it happened by accident, if it would work. But
Okay.
we didn't, it was not designed for that purpose.
Okay. Second question I had, you said that the parking provision was one spot per unit in the building parking?
No, basically, and again, I'll let Dave answer that as far as,
Allocated-
the,
allocated spots
the
per-
assigned spaces, sorry,
Yes.
the assigned spaces per unit, I will defer that to Mr. Checchio. That's an operational thing that he can answer.
Okay. Does anybody know the answer? off
The
top
answer
of
is
their head?
that the
Well-
spaces are assigned
Yeah.
to the individual apartment.
Yeah. and
But we just don't know how
are
many.
assigned Per apartment.
I'm going to wait until our traffic consultant and Mr. Checchio comes up.
Okay, so you don't know the answer?
I don't know the answer.
Okay.
Let's keep the questions to this specific
Okay,
professional,
you
okay?
stated the number of. the
I
one
understand
per
that, but we have a traffic expert that's going to do that. I know that, yes,
unit. Okay.
okay? You'll get your questions answered,
Okay.
definitely. Yes, come on up.
Sir, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the true self you got?
I do.
Please state your name and address and spell your last name.
My name is Jesse Ruzicka, Rucicka, 446 Main Street, Bedminster. Just a few questions. I want to go back to the trees. How many, I may have missed it, you may have stated, how many trees are being removed?
We have a tree removal plan, I don't know off the top of my head, but we have a whole plan that calculates out how many trees are removed, what size they are, and then the ordinance has a replacement value or number of trees for each one. I can certainly get that for you, I just don't have it in front of me.
I'm willing to wait.
Madam Chairman, this is an appropriate time for a 5-minute break.
Okay, let's do that. I think that, we'll take 5 minutes, okay?
You want pencil?
Yep.
That's it. Okay.
She's not going to come back tonight.
Can we go, Sean? Are we okay?
Yes, we're all set.
We're all set,
Yeah.
okay. We are going to hear testimony till 10 o'clock, and then we'd like to adjourn at that point, and we'll continue on. Okay? So we'll see how much we can get done by then. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much. Again, my question originally was how many trees are you planning to remove from the property?
Yes, and I'm referring to the tree removal plan, which is part of the package, has a chart on it. The total trees to be removed is 239.
Are you certain?
I am.
So the grid that I'm representing, though, as part of the plans for the town, represents that 1,515 trees were to be removed. Can you explain that number?
Yeah, I think I can. I think that may have been the replacement trees when you include all of the ash trees. And I can certainly look at that if you want me to, but that number does ring a bell, because when we originally did the calculation, including the ash trees, I think it was up around 1,500 of replacement trees, that not to be removed.
And so what is the average height or diameter of the trees you're removing?
I don't have it averaged. The tree inventory summary, which is on the plan, has all of the trees categorized from 5-inch diameter to 37-inch, and it has all of the numbers on there. So I don't have an average, but the data is on there.
And so the trees that you'll be replacing, I understand it'll be in the neighborhood of 150, provided that your plan allows for that. What is the size of those trees that you'll be replacing with?
Sorry, the 150 was the number that I said we estimated for the back area. to be replaced. We already have 73 trees on the plan.
Understood.
So it would be 150 plus the 73 would be the total. And the size of those trees to be replaced, I think that it is on the chart, but it will be per the ordinance. Typically, the trees, evergreen trees are 8 to 10 feet, and the deciduous trees go by caliper. They're usually 2.5 to 3 inch caliper when they're planted.
So you'll be removing 200-plus trees that, according to the grid, have ranges anywhere from 5 inches to 37 inches, and you're going to be replacing them with trees that have a diameter of just a few inches.
Yes.
Why wouldn't you replace trees with the same size trees that are being removed?
We're complying with the ordinance as far as the trees being replaced.
Are you sure? Because you stated you needed a waiver to comply with the ordinance, because the ordinance is going to require you to have 500 trees to replace. Yet you're telling me you may be able to fit 150 plus the existing 773.
Yeah, but you just stated the size, not the number. So as far as the size is concerned, that the replacement trees will comply with the ordinance.
So my question is, why wouldn't you replace the trees with the same size trees you're removing?
They're too big.
For who? They're already there.
No.
Madam Chair, this is not an argument.
New
It's not an
trees.
argument. I'm asking for questions. You're replacing 200-plus trees with tiny little saplings and removing what is currently designated for a portion of that property in the master plan is designated forest. I'd like to better understand your plan for the trees you're replacing.
The trees will be replaced in accordance with the ordinance.
Which requires 500 trees, am I correct?
Correct.
How are you going to put 500 trees when an hour ago you stated you can fit 150 new trees?
We are requesting a waiver for the difference between.
So you won't be.
I'm sorry.
You'll be
Sir,
submitting for a waiver.
Mr. Ruzicka,
Yeah.
slow down and just wait for the witness to answer. When he's done, then go to your next question.
Fair enough. The question was, how can you fit 500 trees that are of the same size when you're suggesting you can only fit 150?
We are not fitting 500 trees on the site.
Okay. And the plan is to instead do 150 much smaller trees than what's existing.
No. Our plan is to plant approximately 150 trees in the rear portion, plus the 73 trees that are already on the plan, for a total of around 220. And as I had stated, I think 3 or 4 times already, that we will go back and redesign it, so the numbers that we're talking about will be better defined once the design is done. However, the numbers that we're talking about will probably be in that 200, 220 range at a minimum, could be more, and strictly by the ordinance requirement, there will be a waiver required because 500 trees are required and we will not hit that number.
And again, I'll repeat the question because I don't think I gave you a full opportunity to answer. What size tree will you be planting, diameter and/or height?
Evergreen trees will probably be on the order of 8 to 10 feet at planting, and deciduous trees will probably be on the order of 2.5 to 3 inch caliper, which is a typical tree at planting.
And what is the plan to move past the fact that the master plan has that space as forest?
This is not a question for the...
Yeah, I defer to our planner on that for the
Okay.
master plan.
Let's ask the question for the planner then. And you had suggested you're going to change your plan to accommodate as many trees as possible. Would that include reducing or removing buildings that are and/or impervious coverage and/or grilling areas?
No.
No.
Okay. So in other words, you have no intent to comply with the number of trees. You're hoping that the land use board approves the reduction of the number of trees required.
I think the testimony speaks for itself, and that's, we've answered the question 5 times.
All right, I'll move to another section. So did you do any kind of study in Bedminster to see the number of cars the average resident of Bedminster owns?
I did not.
Sir, how many cars do you own?
1.
And your wife?
1.
You have children?
I'm not even sure where this line...
Where I'm going with the testimony is the average person does not own 1 car. A family who's going to have 2 cars. So the number of spaces are not allowing the number of cars that are going to be on that property, especially with retail use. And this is on a major road. I think it's reasonable to expect that cars are going to be parking out on the road. which is going to cause problems?
I'll let Mr. Jaworski answer the question, but...
I think it should be for our traffic expert.
Yeah, and
Yes.
the proposal complies with the ordinance.
And I think there's some confusion, Mr. Rizika. It's not one parking space per apartment. That's just the designated parking spaces that the applicant is talking about. But if you would like to, I think you might want to find out how many parking spaces are total proposed, how many are required by the ordinance or RSIS for those units.
So I did hear that. There are 97 required, there are 99 proposed. That's not information. There's 40 apartments proposed with one space each, with retail space. This is what you've said over the course of the evening, yes?
No. The parking calculation is based on RSIS, which has a certain number of spaces based on the bedrooms. So each apartment has a different number of bedrooms. There's a calculation RSIS gives you, and when you run the numbers through that and add the retail in, it comes out to the 97 spaces. So it is not a strict one-to-one ratio. The RSIS provides that information, and we are bound to comply with the RSIS because this is a residential development.
Is it not mixed use? You're calling it residential, but you're representing that there's retail. So I'm not the zoning expert, but why are you calling it residential when there's commercial real estate and potentially retail stores?
The residential component is governed by RSIS. There is a mixed-use component in one of the buildings with a 4,000 square foot retail. That also has a parking calculation in it. When you put the two together, the requirement is 97 spaces. 99 are proposed, and thus it complies with the requirements.
All right, so the gentleman earlier asked about tractor trailers and moving. Are there going to be rules about when people are allowed to move in or out of the property, timing-wise?
Yes, and I will defer to Mr. Checchio, who will talk to the operations of that based on his experience of the other buildings, but we did discuss that in our meetings, and they do have schedules and designated times for those moves.
And in the event the property were approved and built, who would be responsible for policing the move-in times and move-out times? And the type of vehicle that's used for the move?
Mr. Checchio will answer that.
That's the traffic gentleman.
No, that's the
principal of the applicant.
Thank you. Okay. Relative to large vehicles, please explain your plan for a fire truck, which is likely the same size as a tractor trailer, to get in and solve any issues that need to be solved in the unit.
Yeah, we did run a template of the fire truck into the site and around the cul-de-sac, and it complies with the turning radiuses.
So how many fire trucks can fit in the unit at any one point in time based on your assessment?
I don't know.
Is it reasonable to think that a unit of that size, if there were actually a fire, would require more than one fire truck?
I would defer to the fire department on that.
Okay. In your professional opinion, do you think the space allows for multiple fire trucks?
I don't know.
You may have already shared it. How many acres is the green space behind all the parking, behind the proposed retaining walls?
I don't know exactly. The total site is about 5 acres, and it's about half of that, so approximately 2.5 acres would remain green in the rear.
And what was the justification for putting such structures so close to Leamington Road as opposed to putting them in a different area?
I think 2 reasons. One was to try to preserve the buffer to the rear where the residential are to the north. And 2, the topography. The further back you push the buildings, the more land you have to disturb, the higher the walls get because of the large grade difference.
So you proposed early on you need a variance for the height of the structures. I don't recall exactly how far off that variance is. Why wouldn't you have designed it in compliance of the height restriction?
That's a complicated question. There's a lot of factors that go into a development like this as far as the number of units and the feasibility of the overall project. We as a team with our planner and our traffic engineer and our applicant have to kind of put all those elements together and come up with a plan that works. Sometimes plans like this do require variances for various things such as height to make it all work. In this instance, this development evolved and it resulted in a height variance that we're requesting for. However, based on the overall benefit of the development, which as a team we think is the benefits outweigh the detriments. We believe it's a good design. That really goes to the planning question. The planning testimony goes a lot deeper into the answer to that question, but it's a little bit complex. There's a lot of factors.
So, spare me for my ignorance, what is the property currently zoned for? Because today there are 2 residences on it. What is it zoned for?
Yes, it's the Village Neighborhood Zone, VN zone. I don't have all of the uses that are permitted on that, but our planner can certainly expound on that.
So when the property was purchased, was the intent to demolish those 2 existing structures and to build a massive apartment complex and completely violate the intending master plan?
I have no idea.
Mr. Jaworski answer that question. That's really a question, a comment. It's more of at the end, he wants to make a comment, but you're asking engineering questions.
All right, I don't have any further questions, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Yeah, come on. Luke, you want to come up? Luke, you want to come up? Come on.
Good evening.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth so help you God?
I do.
Please state your last name and spell it.
Louis D. Giovine, D-I-G-I-O-V-I-N-E.
And your address, Lou?
2460 Lamington Road.
Thank you.
I have some questions regarding stormwater. Do you have a stormwater plan here for us to view on a board?
I do not. It's the grading and utility plan, which is part of the package. I do not have it mounted.
Okay, so can I ask you some questions about this plan here?
Sure.
It seems to me that most of the water is directed to the southeast corner of the property. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And at the southeast corner of the property, over here, it seems to me from what I've seen or heard, that you have one inlet here. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that you have 2 drainage basins that all feed to this area?
Correct.
And then when they overflow, they feed into the city storm system?
The existing storm system, yes.
Okay, so the questions I ask, I know that you've done some calculations regarding the amount of water that comes off of the property.
Yes.
Have you ever been at the property during a heavy rainstorm, such as the last week or 2 that we've had?
I have not.
Are you aware of what water drainage looks like in the street on Lamington Road during those storms?
No.
Are you aware that the drainage system, that the sewer drainage system that the county has there backs up and doesn't really handle the water in a heavy storm? Are you aware of that?
No.
Once the water enters the street, are you familiar with where it goes to?
No, I do know it goes to the east. I did not track it further down than that.
Okay. Are you aware of what's directly across the street from your driveway?
As far as the drainage or as far as use?
As far as the properties?
I don't remember what's exactly across from that.
It is another driveway for a house.
Okay.
And then just a little bit east of that, there's another driveway for my property. And just a little bit more east of that, there's another driveway for my property because we have a circular driveway. So are you aware that once the water leaves your property at this point in time, not maybe in the future, but at present, that the water runs down east on Lamington Road?
Yes,
Okay, once it runs east on Lamington Road, do you know where it goes then?
I do not.
Okay, would you mind if I told you?
I wouldn't mind
It
now.
goes into my driveway and all the way down into my backyard. So my concern would be that the stormwater drainage here, that I think if we could, would be willing to put some kind of French drain here to catch water as it comes off of the driveway and not just the one inlet.
Yeah, and just to expound on it, we do have a trench drain at the end of the driveway, which will pick that up. And just vertically, the drainage study, basically, the regulations make us reduce the peak flows for the developed condition, thus the detention basins. So what happens is they act as very simply large bathtubs, and then there's a controlled outlet. So basically, when you get those heavy, intense storms, they fill the basin up, and it's controlled with a lower flow than is leaving the site today. It's actually, we have to reduce the 2, 10, and 25 and 100-year storm of what it is today. So the developed condition has to reduce that and let it bleed out much slower so those real intense storms do not cross the street and go into other people's property. So that's the regulations we're bound by. So Mr. Ferrero reviews our calculations, so you got 2 engineers making sure that we comply with that. But that's kind of it in a nutshell. But yeah, we do have a trench drain at the bottom of that driveway, so any of the water running down the driveway would get caught before flowing out the driveway.
So can I ask that you make sure that you catch all of your water? And is it possible to catch every bit, every drop of water that comes off of your property?
Can't guarantee it, but we will try our best to make sure that happens. That's really what the drainage studies are for and the drainage design is.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think I saw one more hand back there. Yes? Yes, come on.
Couple more.
Couple more. All right.
Sir, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes.
And please state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address.
Andrew Isaacs, 15 Steeplechase Court. Can you just please clarify your comment earlier about when you were asked why the variance, and you said it wasn't suitable for the development?
Oh, which variance was that?
The height, and you said when you were looking at the property and they were doing the design, right? And you said something about, well, you needed that to make it worthwhile.
I'm not going to put words in Mr. Jaworski's mouth.
You can read
With
that.
all due respect, I would like to have our planner talk about the variances. He's more qualified to talk about
That was his
variances.
testimony.
Jeff, let Mr. Lair say what he wants to say, and then we'll decide whether you can ask the question.
Mr. Jaworski made a hypothesis based upon the team talking and meeting, and he basically said that the benefit...
Let's go back. Let's slow down. You're objecting to the question. The question was related to the witness's direct testimony or his cross-examined testimony. It's an appropriate question for cross-examination, and I'm going to rule that the witness should, well, the question should be re-asked, but the basic question should be answered. Okay? So I think Mr. Jaworski remembers it, but if you want to rephrase it or anything, so please go ahead, Mr. Jaworski, you understand.
Yeah, I understand the question. Basically, it's a complex question and answer, and what I was trying to do is just say that the team, there's a lot of different variables that go into design of a development, and sometimes in the developments, when we get at the end, we need variances. We think that the benefits of this development outweigh the detriments, and then I defer to the planner, who will go into much more depth of how we came to that conclusion. But that's kind of the short answer, that it's not a very straightforward, clear answer. There's a lot of different variables, and our planner's much better versed at addressing that in the bigger picture.
Can you talk about a couple of benefits that you're referring to?
I'll defer that to our planner.
No idea what those benefits are. Is it?
I'll defer to our planner.
Can you clarify, there's been some conversations about the units and the number of parking spots, just, there was some confusion back there. So I apologize if we're repeating some stuff, but it's my understanding it's 99 spots, about 40 apartments, correct?
Correct.
And how do the spots get allocated? Well, how many of the 99 are allocated to the apartments versus the retail space?
Right, that question was asked before. They are assigned spots. I'll defer to Mr. Checchio, who's the developer and operator who operates these. I am not sure how many spots per apartment
They're not
get.
just in total, of the 99, how many are for the renters?
As I was saying, I am not sure how many get assigned per apartment, which would lead to how many of the 99 go to the apartment, so I'll defer to Mr. Checchio to answer that.
Joe, if I could, I think the question is, on your parking calculations, how many parking spots are required by the RSIS for the residential use, and how many parking spaces are required for the retail use?
The residential units require 78.4 spaces, The retail requires 17.8 spaces.
Thank you. And if there were no requests for any variances, approximately how many parking spots would there be?
The same number.
No, without the building. If you did not go to, if we didn't have these plans, and it was not asking for any variances, I think you might have like a certain number of single-family homes on that property. It might be 10, 12, 16 homes.
I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
So the point I'm trying to make is that it's almost 100 parking spots in the entire steeplechase court, which is a quarter-mile long, 16, 18 homes. You may have 36, 38 cars. Here, you're going to triple that amount in one little spot.
I can make a statement, or are you asking a question?
When you agree.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree.
I've been seeing Mr. Galvin pass notes back and forth. I don't, who is he representing? I would ask that he just really try and keep it to a minimum to his client.
Before in your testimony, you mentioned a few times that the retail space of 4,000 square feet, I think I quote here, is not very big. Is that correct?
Relatively, we do a lot of retail work, and relatively, the retail space of 4,000 square feet is relatively small.
Yeah, that was my question. Compared to what?
Compared to a CVS, compared to a Walmart, compared to, larger box uses.
And are there any other large retail stores on that street that are as large as 4,000 square feet?
I do not know.
And have you spent any time on, let's say, Steeplechase or in the area looking at the size of those homes?
No.
Are you aware of what the size of those homes typically are?
No.
Would it surprise you to say they're probably between 2,000 and 3,000 square foot for the entire home?
No comment.
So when someone says it's not very large, 4,000 square feet, someone living in something smaller than that might say, hey, that's not necessarily accurate.
They might.
Okay, thank you. So it's my understanding, I'm not sure if you know this or not, that I think it's about, if there were no variances, it would be, I think, 14 or so single-family homes. So what they're really asking for is a 600% increase, right? Is to the variance. And triple the amount of cars that we have on board.
Mr. Isaacs, now you're testifying, so
Sorry.
that's for later.
Okay.
And
one last question. Do you have any financial interest in this development?
No.
Thank you.
Yes, please, come up.
yes, do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address and spell your last name.
Sure. Sean Jean, Jean. I'm at 7 Steeplechase Court in Bedminster. So I don't know how this works, guys. I've just found out about this, so it sounds like I just can do engineering questions. Right?
That's correct. You asked the question for this witness.
And there'll
Yes,
be other...
there will be other witnesses that will be able
Gotcha.
to answer your questions, yes.
So, the one thing that I'm trying to figure out, so if you didn't get the variances, you mentioned that the coverage ratio was like 14% right now, and you could go up to 20. If you didn't get the other variances and couldn't go 49 feet high, wouldn't 29,000 square feet exceed, like if you were within the boundaries, wouldn't it exceed the coverage ratio?
I'm not sure what the question is, if you could
Here's what I'm
restate
trying to
it.
say.
Okay.
There are 4 variances. If we take all those together, they each kind of tie to each other. So we're saying we comply with the coverage ratio, but we only comply because of the other 4 variances. So if you didn't get these other things, you would be out of compliance with the coverage ratio.
Possibly. Possibly.
Math, right? I mean, you would be.
Well,
1,000 square feet, 2 stories would be over the coverage ratio.
I don't think it's...
No, the answer is we comply with what we're doing. We comply with the township's coverage requirement for the VN zone.
If you get the 4 variances.
No, the way the site is designed, pure and simple, we are below the coverage requirement as designed.
But the design requires 4 variances in order to comply.
So what's your question?
I'm just stating a point that you could put a skyscraper on that point, and you'd make the coverage ratio.
Do you have a question? You know,
So I can't hit anything about tax implications
No,
or the
no.
benefit. Sound, let me go, sorry guys, this is the last thing I want to do, and believe me, but I have to because this is going
well,
to
make it a question, please.
Great. So, the sound, I want to go back to that. So you answered the question about the air conditioner and the manufacturer's warranty, and you don't need a sound study or whatever. You didn't hit the 97 cars. So the sound study that the gentleman raised before, had you done a study or have you looked at the impact of the noise from the cars?
No.
Okay. And I don't know if I can ask about this. So have you done any study about the real estate in the area and the vacancy?
I have not.
Different witness.
Different group, okay. Traffic studies, different group. Trees. So the gentleman went through, and I don't know what it is, he went through a whole series of the different trees. I'm just wondering is it possible to do the math on the actual wood that we're taking out, the volume of wood we're taking out, and the volume of wood you're proposing? And what's the percent difference?
Yeah, the ordinance pretty much does along what you're saying. Basically, the number of trees removed based on their size has a number of replacement trees associated with it. Just for instance, a 5 to 15 inch tree that's removed requires, one tree removed requires 5 replacement trees. So what I'm saying is the amount of wood, it's about this chart that the ordinance lays out, that's what it does. It basically says for this size tree, you need a amount of more trees to replace it. That's how the calculation's done.
But you're getting a waiver because you're not, right?
Well, we're requesting the waiver because the way the calculation comes out, 500 trees are required. We're going to redesign, we think we can get up around 220, 230, so the waiver will be for the difference between that number and the 500.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Mr. Haggerty, you have another question?
Ryan Haggerty, Fairview Drive, I understand Stony Road. So 2 new questions based on what I just heard. I didn't quite get the number, I was slow with the pen. Number of parking spaces caused by residential and number of parking spaces caused by retail. Could you repeat that?
Yes, the RSIS standards require 4 bedroom counts for the residential requires 78.4 spaces, and the retail portion requires 17.8.
Okay, do you first round those up to integer numbers and then add together?
No. Unless Mr. Ferrero tells me I need to do that.
Okay, so that should be that 78 plus 18. And it looks like you need 96, so I think you rounded up both. Okay, you rounded up both, fine, very good.
Don't help them.
It's a joke, it's a joke. That's rule number 1. Rule number 1 of cross-examination.
No lawyer, I'm just fact-finding here. No lawyers are being professional courtesy. I'm going to give this what you're saying.
I just want to know, I'll place my objection on the record.
Well, I would like to explain. I do have a statement to make to Mr. Ware's comment.
No.
Mr. Galvin said that the attorney was passing out pieces of paper. He handed me his business card.
I'm not talking about
Not time. For the record, I needed that for the record. Thank you very much. Wow, I have one other question. I forgot. Got me off my game. I didn't know it was that easy. Something what Sean said was the parking, and something what Drew said. Oh, if you were to build this out to the as of right with single-family homes, would you have sufficient tree disturbance to need a waiver? Or not know at this time?
I do not know that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Luke, you have another question?
I think there's one follow-up.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Jaworski, Lou DiGiovanni again. Do you plan on making a presentation, or is someone, one of your team, making a presentation for stormwater drainage based on plans?
No, that was my testimony today. We will go back with Mr. Ferrero's office to go through his comments, update the drainage study, and then I would think the board would want me to explain whatever changes we made at a future meeting.
I would like to ask if it would be possible to make a presentation once again about stormwater drainage at some point when you have some changes in the calculation.
I'm certainly fine with that. It would be up to the team.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think it might be a good idea that you come back and just
Yeah, no problem.
refresh our
Sure,
memories as to
sure.
what you've changed.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? Are we done with this witness? Good, I'm glad to see that. Anything
Okay,
further?
no,
Yes, go right ahead, Nick.
Sort of an odd comment now, as more numbers came out.
Uh-huh.
I noticed that building number 1 has 18 units and 36 parking spots underneath, while building 2 has 22 units and 21 parking spots. And so I was surprised to come to the conclusion that some of the tenants have to park outside, right? Because you said you needed 70-something parking spaces
Well,
for the tenants.
yeah, Mr. Cyril, I'm going to defer to Ms. Checkio on the operations. The 78.4 spaces, that's a calculated number based on our SIS.
Right.
So it's just a calculation to say they think we need this many spaces per regulations, and that's what we provide. I'll let Dave go through the operations, especially with his other buildings, how it works, what spaces get assigned, and
Does that
all
include
operations.
visitors?
Exactly. He'll be able to tell you that.
And I have a question. I think somebody from the group up here brought it up about if there was a doctor's office. So when you calculated that retail portion of the required parking,
Yeah.
what type of retail did you use?
Basically, general retail, and per your ordinance, that requires 1 space per 225 square feet. So if there's a tenant, doctor's office, a cafe, that has a parking requirement that's different than 1 per 225, the other would have to come back to this board and ask for either relief or approval of that. So if this gets approved, you're approving 1 space per 225 general retail, whatever use that might be.
And if it was a doctor's office, can you tell us what the parking requirement would be?
I don't know off the top of my hand. We can look it up in the ordinance.
I think it's certainly important if it's a potential tenant.
Yeah, but the
They'd
point
have
is
to
that
come
if it's different from this, the applicant has to come back. It's not like they can get away with the approval for this. They would have to come back to this board
For what?
for a different parking calculation,
For another variance?
potentially.
Potentially.
Potentially, yeah, because
different
if,
use.
say they get a user that requires more parking than the 99, that kicks them into a variance, they have to come back.
Yeah, but that's what we're trying to avoid.
Well, the problem is that the developer doesn't have a tenant yet. So they don't know what tenant's going to be in there. So they get their approval based on this, and then you work from there.
So you're calculating on the lowest amount,
We're
right?
calculating on what's required by your ordinance for a general retail use.
Anyone else on the board? No. Mr. Lair, what would you like to do? We're
Well,
about
I
10 minutes
have,
to
10
10.
minutes. I have 10 minutes. I could at least start with Mr. Checkio. and-
Just a question in the back.
Well, as a follow-up, there's a question because of the board.
All right, come on.
Thank you. Because of the comment about the doctor's office.
All right.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth so help you God?
I do.
And please state your name and address and spell your last name.
Bonnie Bishop, B-I-S-H-O-P, 17, People Chase Court, Bedminster. Thank you. So in follow-up to your question about whether or not it's a doctor's office and you have to come back for a variance, what type of variance would you request?
It would be a parking
Well-
variance.
I'm sorry. Sometimes I think I'm an engineer. Basically, if a use came in, doctor's office or any other use that required additional parking above what we calculated, and kicked it over that requirement of 99 spaces, then the applicant would have to come back to this board for a parking space variance.
Meaning you would request more parking places, you'd build additional parking? What, can you define that?
Yeah, that would basically be either asking a variance to say, keep the 99 and ask for a variance for whatever over it, or come back and say, we can build 5 more spaces to comply, but that increases the impervious coverage, that changes the circulation, it still makes the applicant come back either way. So if that parking calculation changes in any way that differs from this 1 per 225, then the applicant would have to come back for that.
So as an example, on your diagram there, that you would potentially, this is a question, have to build out further into the land?
Well, it could be, however, based on the topography and the wall, the feasibility of pushing further to the north is very, very, very low.
How about to the east or west?
Potentially to the west, the east, the driveway's there's not enough room to go anywhere. To the west, there is a little bit room between the end of the driveway and the recreation area, so that could potentially be, but again, there's retaining walls there as well, so the topography is really going to dictate that.
And so we don't know how many additional cars now, at this point in time, for spaces it would require?
No, this is all designed on general retail per the ordinance, so as long as the tenant comes in and fits that, this plan will work. If anything differs and pushes them above that 99 spaces, they would have to come back, and then those types of things would be looked at and what's feasible.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Madam Chairman, if I
Yes.
could, I just want to clarify something to let everybody know how these kinds of things work. An application gets approved by this board for a non-residential use.
Yep.
Anytime any tenant comes in, an application must be made to the zoning officer and myself for a change in tenancy. We review that potential tenant, against the parking that was approved for that use. If the parking that was approved on that site doesn't comply, then they have to come back to the board. We don't approve that change in tenancy.
Correct.
If, for example, a use came in there that needed more than the 17 spaces that are required, that change in tenancy would not be approved. They were told it would be rejected, and we would tell them, you either have to come back to the board or get a different tenant. So that's reviewed for every time
Right.
a tenant comes into any non-residential space.
I understand that, yes. Absolutely. Okay, Mr. Lair, what would you like to do?
Can I just?
Sure.
Madam Chair, if we could just close on the engineer.
Uh-huh.
I don't think it makes sense to bring Mr. Checchio up for continuity purposes.
Right,
So
agreed.
if we could just close on the engineer's testimony and then
Okay.
bring Mr. Checchio up next time.
Okay, I think that sounds fine. I think we should have Mr. Jaworski come back, though, for the drainage. So let's plan on that.
Yeah,
Okay.
not a problem.
Okay.
Ms. Madam Chairman, we should carry to a date certain, and the board should select the date.
Okay, I think
Based on our earlier discussions, that would be September 12th.
September 12th.
That's fine for me, Madam Chair. I don't know
Good.
about, for my professionals, whether that works. Yeah? Okay.
Mr. Galvin,
Okay.
does that work for you? September 12th, second Thursday.
He had to get his hair done that night, I'm sorry.
I'm good.
Okay, so this application, Elite, will be carried without additional notices to September 12th, 2019 at 7 p.m., same room.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Okay, is there any further board member comments? Everybody is, yes, all right. Motion to adjourn. All right,
Aye.
we're all done.
Yeah, on the
Oh, you want to turn us off?
Joe, you can just leave right here.
Paul, want to turn us off?